All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Of Like Minds podcast, episode 3. We've got a very special episode today featuring one of my closest friends and one of my biggest inspirations. Everyone, welcome Mike Wamungu. Thank you for coming on, Mike, and giving us your time today, man.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. It's good to see your face, Kevin.
Likewise, man. It's great to see your face, brother. Mike, just starting off, you and I, we met in college and you did a lot. And I'm talking anything and everything. And if you could just share with us and just let us know, like, the experiences you had at UCLA. Obviously, it's one of the top public universities in the world, and it's well-rounded. But if you can just talk and share the world, the rich experience that you kind of involved yourself with, and how you navigated through that.
I'm a Bruin born, bred, Bruin dead. You know how it is. But yeah, UCLA was pivotal. The life I have now would not have without UCLA. I think it was a catalyst. It's kind of one of those, like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like transformational seasons for me personally. And while I was there, I majored in sociology. I did research with the Graduate School of Education, kind of studying Black males in education and what that experience is like, challenges and also success stories. And I also studied in graduate school psychology, the social psych lab, and we're studying stereotype threat and women in the workplace as well, or social stigma in the workplace. There you go. And obviously, I danced as well. That's very central to how we met. So yeah, I think if you ask me more specifically, like what about those experiences you want me to riff on, I could go into that. But in terms of how I approached it, I majored in sociology, and the whole time I was there, so many well-meaning friends and family, etc., were like, "Yo, why are you majoring in sociology? Sociology is easy. You gotta do STEM. You gotta do, whatever." And they meant well, and they were looking out for me. But I saw no point in majoring in something that I didn't feel passionate about, and I had such varied interests, and sociology allowed me to take classes under history, under psychology, under politics, poli-sci, under just so many different avenues, economics even. And it really provided me with a good baseline of how the world operates, how institutions operate, and how collectively we make do in this world. So I loved it, and I wouldn't do it differently at all.
Absolutely. And you hit it on the head with that when you talked about, it's a big thing. You said that you felt like it made no sense to major in something unless you were passionate about it. And so just talking about how that passion from your major to being very specific and strategic about what you were going to apply yourself with in terms of your other time commitments. So what were the other things, like you said, that you had explained? You did research, you did dance. Maybe you can talk about those other passions and kind of how you navigated with that and just how you balanced all that too.
Yeah, so I think my general approach is I wanted to put myself in a position to succeed. And I also wanted to put myself in a position in which there was structure and direction, but there was also room to explore and grow. And so with choosing sociology, it was less, I'm very passionate about this and what I'm going to do. It was more taking inventory of my strengths. I could write well, I could speak well, I could read like a maniac, critical thinking skills were sharp. And so I was like, if I want to have an experience that extends beyond the classroom here at UCLA, I should choose something that I kind of already have an affinity for, that I have an interest in, and that will kind of like help me do well in it. But because I have an affinity for it, because I have an interest in it, it'll come more naturally. I'll have an easier time, and it will allow me to explore other like vehicles of self-exploration, expression. So being that I could read and write in my sleep, and sociology was a lot of critical thinking, a lot of reading and writing, and just cross-functional literacy. It allowed me to like kind of have a good grounding of what my coursework was going to look like, and then start to pick and choose what I was going to get involved in. And so how dance came about is I had an athletic background in high school. I played basketball, I ran track, and I'm 5'9", so I wasn't about to go no D1 basketball. I didn't get recruited anywhere. You know what I'm saying? I started, but I wasn't nice like that. And so when I got to UCLA, I just kind of wanted to continue just keeping my body active and moving. And I had always had an affinity for dance. I've been dancing since I was a little kid, not in an organized manner or in the studio, but just family functions, trying to recreate usher videos, and whatnot. And so I noticed like these group of people rehearsing in the parking lot. And I was like, yo, what is going on? And then I think somebody handed me like a flyer or whatever, and it was like, yo, we dance. This a hip hop dance team. That's what we do. I thought the movement was dope. We have auditions like, second week of school or whatever, something like that. Come to these workshops. And one of my roommates at the time, well, actually, it wasn't even a roommate, but it was somebody that I did a freshman summer program with. He was like, "Yeah, I had seen him dance at a party. I did a little something. He seen me dance, and it was like, oh, okay, kind of nice with it, And he was like, "Yo, just do it. It's fun. There's a lot of girls. It's something to do after class." And so I hopped into dance that way. Gave myself the opportunity and auditioned. Um, it felt kind of like Bambi. Had to get my legs under me and kind of like learn how to move in that way. But it worked out well. And it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. So that's how I kind of got into the dance space. Actually, let me reverse back just a tad bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember Bruin Day. I don't know if you went to Bruin Day, but Bruin Day, for those of you that are listening, is a Saturday sometime during the spring in which all the admitted kids,
all the new admits, the year prior,
yeah. And so I had signed up through the African Student Union, and they had like this whole weekend where they paired you up with a current student. I happened to get there super early, and so I got there, signed in, and it was just like, yo, you like 6 hours early, bro. and so,
not surprised.
And so one of my best friends now, which is the girl I met at the time, she was like, oh, I'll take him to like class with me. And she happened to have a WAC class that day. WAC is World Arts and Culture. And so my first class at UCLA, not official, but the first class I ever participated in was hip hop class. I think it was somebody else's class, but I think Jackie was teaching that day.
I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I should have known there that dance was going to be, a part of my UCLA journey in some capacity. But yeah, so that's how dance started. And with the research, I had taken a social psychology course, and I just really enjoyed it. I felt like it was one of the most readily applicable classes I took at UCLA. It taught me a lot about how we operate as people, as a culture. And the professor, after taking the final, she just kind of like approached me and she was like, "Hey, have you ever been interested in like doing research? I noticed that you came, the last lecture of that quarter was a grad school lecture, and I sat in just to see what grad school was like. She gave a little breakdown on what grad school would be. She was like, I noticed you came to that lecture. Have you ever been interested in research?" And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'd be open to it. What kind of research do you do? And she was like, oh, we study stereotype threat and social stigma. I have a lab, also teach at Anderson, the business school. And, like we need more males, we need more people of color. And if you'd be interested, I would love for you to consider applying. And so it was dope because, sometimes like there's a sense of hyper visibility and invisibility at the same time when you're at a school like UCLA and being like
Mm-hmm.
an immigrant or a black male. Um, and so it's hyper visible. There's not that many of us, you know what I'm saying? But also uh, invisible in a way is because there's not that many of us, it can sometimes feel like you're alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that people, they see you, but they kind of avoid you. So her kind of like seeing me and asking me if I wanted to participate was dope. And so I did that research that way. And the education research was, by one of the greatest men I've ever met in my life. His name is Dr. Howard. He's an education professor at UCLA, and he just provided a space for us to do research and kind of help those in high school and those younger than us navigate education. So that's how
Wow.
I ended up doing those things.
That's incredible, Mike. I think you've always been someone who was fearless and was open minded and wanted that challenge, and it's kind of cool to see that translate not only you know outside of the classroom but also within the classroom and in those extracurricular spaces. So that's honestly really really incredible. I did want to kind of point back. You said something really that stuck out to me. Just coming in with this mentality, of I'm thinking back like to 18-year-old Mike. If you think about it, that was almost 10 years ago, bro. Almost 10 years ago. And so I'm thinking, how in the hell did you have such this is what's going on in my head as you're talking. Like, how was all these things like being so strategic in what you were doing? And for me, I just have to ask. I have to ask about, like home. I have to ask about home. I know you have a twin brother. I know you have a younger brother. I know you have, a great family and a support system. I think that has a lot to do with you having that great head on your shoulders. If you can just talk about that, man, and just because I see it from 18, you're already, you know, just scratching the surface of the man you are today. So just talk about like sharing a little bit about your family, man.
Yeah, I think, and just to make clear, I think a lot of times, with these interviews and whatnot, sometimes it seems like, oh yeah, it's this, and this, and this, and it wasn't that at all. Hindsight is 2020,
Yeah.
and it's easy to piece a narrative, after the fact. But what I will say is a lot of that, as you said, did come from home. So I immigrated to the United States from the Democratic Republic of Congo when I was about 7 months before I turned 8. My family was there. We were doing well. It's a beautiful country, beautiful people. But it fell on hard times and war, essentially. And so being in the position that we're in, we had a bit of privilege. We weren't like well off or anything, but my parents had both graduated from college, both had decent jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the war hit, we were kind of like in a position, both financially and um, uh, socially, in terms of just having friends and knowing people, et cetera, to try to uh, plan an escape route, if you will. So we applied at the American Embassy, got accepted. Um, Series of unfortunate events led to my parents splitting up, and so it was my mom and my three brothers and I, so a total of four boys, trying to navigate this new season, right? And so we spent, as part of the process in coming to this country, we spent 7 months in a refugee camp in Cameroon, um, which was one of the most challenging experiences of my life, but also one of the most pivotal. And I feel where it forced me to grow up early, but also
Mm.
in a large part made me who I am. So we slept in a tent. You know what I'm saying? Other families slept in a tent or barracks. It was hot as hell. It was near a desert. It was rice and beans to eat for 7 months straight. You know what I'm saying? And we didn't know where we would end up. They chose a destination for you based on their kind of like immigration sponsors. And so this organization called Catholic Charities uh, was in partnership with these people. And the destination that we had was Salt Lake City, Utah. Yeah. And I don't know how to explain it outside of God, but we got to JFK, New York, and while they asked my mom to see your papers and where you headed. She was like, Salt Lake City. She spoke a little bit English at the time. And they looked at it, huddled up, talked, etc., and they came back. They're like, "You're going to San Jose, California, instead." And so, I mean, we weren't in a position to protest or whatever, but we ended up in California. You know, one of the best places you could end up. So praise God, because I would have been a weird kid if I grew up in Salt Lake.
Really different.
Yeah. But I mean, having that background, there was a sense of urgency with everything. You know, my mom stressed education. She stressed just that we were here and that we were presented with a choice. We were presented with a new life, and it was up to us, us being my brothers and I, to kind of like seize whatever opportunities we could, to fight for it, and to take it very seriously. And so growing up in school, there was, you know, we were on a short leash. So you go home, you come back, or you go to school, you come back home. You know what I mean? Once we started playing sports, it's like you go to school, play sports, you come back home, and you can't play sports unless you're making really good grades. You know, and we, after San Jose, we lived in a city called Salinas that at the time was the youth homicide capital of the country per capita. So the city is only like 100,000 people deep, but it's an agricultural city. It's a big kind of like migrant location, um, and it was tough. It was a huge gang problem. So just being there and observing that, there was also a big teenage pregnancy problem. It was the second highest county in the nation at the time. And so just kind of being around some of those things, I was like, man, I I felt like I had so much life ahead of me and not want to get caught up. And I was fortunate enough to have really great basketball coaches that preached beyond fundamentals. You know, they used basketball as a medium to teach life lessons about being a man, and they kept us off the street essentially. You know,
Wow.
my coach used to say, uh, if you are, I forget what it was. Oh, they're like on time is 15 minutes early. You know what I mean? And so we would have to run if we got to practice. Say practice was at 5, we would have to get to practice at 4:45.
Mm-hmm.
And if we got there after that, we didn't have to run all the time, but you know, he just give us a side eye.
Yeah.
Yo, like you got to be here on time. You know, so there are certain discipline aspects I learned through the game of basketball, through that mentorship, and then once I got into UCLA, I was like, man, I have no choice but to succeed because the alternative is to go back home, and going back home would be being thrust into that back into that environment. And so I think compared to other 18-year-olds, if you will, and like being the oldest and having navigated an environment of that sort, war in a refugee camp, I might have been 18, but I was probably already like 25, like mentally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that resulted in a lot more like just urgency.
That's incredible. And I think you kind of hit a great transition for us, talking about, home, and talking about all the incredible things and the incredible spaces that you involved yourself with at UCLA, and literally to a T. And obviously, like you said, it didn't just happen. You obviously went through your own adversities to get there. But I want to just kind of go a little bit about, there's almost this this period of time after you graduate, right? Where there's so many different things that can happen. Like the fork in the road is like a million paths as opposed to just like a black and white. And so I think it'd be cool if you can just talk a little bit about the immediate post-grad life. And I know that for you, you had transitioned home for a bit. Maybe just talking about that journey and what that was like and how that adjustment was and all those things.
Yeah, so I think we all, well, maybe not all, some people, they have it much easier, but I know I didn't have tremendous clarity about what I wanted to do. Post graduation, I knew I wanted to have a job. I knew I wanted to be in a creative adjacent field, but I also kind of struggled. I was like, man, should I try to pursue dance like professionally? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
What would that path look like? If should I go to grad school, right? And kind of like focus on this like psychology path, right? And so I was tossing those two things up. And ultimately I decided that I was very burnt out. And it would be in my best interest to just get a job and kind of experiment, try different things, and still within a function that felt creative to me and that felt interesting. And for me, that was marketing. I knew I didn't, although I majored in sociology, I didn't want to get into social work or anything of that sort. The advertising space was interesting to me. Marketing, brand, narrative, etc., was interesting to me. And so, but I had nothing lined up, post grad. And so I just graduated and I had no money, and it was like, man, I have no choice but to go home, right? To kind of like stabilize myself and put myself in a position to move forward. And that was tough, not necessarily because there was anything wrong going home. I don't have any beef with my family, but I had gotten so used to not being dependent, right? And after experiencing 4 years of extreme independence, right, and getting that refund check, you know, um, it felt terrible to go home and then have $0,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, in the bank, and then also to just struggle to get a job. Like the script you're told is, especially when you go to a school like UCLA, you feel like you did what you had to do, you got your good grades, and a job was going to be waiting for you, and that is completely not how it happened at all. And so it took me about 6 months to land a job that felt good and a job that I could officially label as a big boy job. I recognize that even that is a lot more, what's the word for it? It's a lot faster than most. People took my girlfriend, it took her a year. I know people, it took her like longer. But once home, I was sitting on my ass every day, and I kind of gave myself like just time to decompress and to just relax and unpack. And then I spent at least, I want to say, about a month deconstructing how to get a job, right? Deconstructing how to craft a resume, right? How practicing how to talk and write about myself. And from there, it was a function of really just like sitting down and be like, okay, what do I want to do? What am I interested in, right? What exists out there about how to figure these things out, right? And how do I land a job? And so it was difficult because I had to ask my mom for money. I couldn't, my friends were all in LA, you know what I mean? The house I was at wasn't even the house I grew up in. It was a completely new home, you know? And I couldn't get out, you know what I mean? I didn't have a car. So it was a lot of days spent inside the house, trying to apply for jobs, hearing nothing back, and it was tough, on Snapchat, on Instagram, whatever. Like you see your friends having fun in LA, and it's just like, man. And so there was a period in which I beat myself up about it, but I also just realized, like, look, I have a new opportunity ahead of me, and there are things outside of my control, but there are very real things that I can control. And I can learn how to navigate this next season, and I can, do my best. So I did that.
That's amazing. And just for the viewers and whoever's tuning in and listening to this episode, I mean, speaking from experience as well, I think for someone who you just graduated university and, like you said, UCLA is, a top university. You have this almost this ego because you've worked so hard and you've done all these things, you've done everything right by the book. And then it almost is kind of really grounding to move back home because that is the financially most responsible thing to do to set yourself up for the future. And I just quickly, if you can expand on, I think it's a real issue currently with just living through other people. And I think social media can be a great tool to market yourself and brand yourself and get yourself out there and reach to the masses. But I also think, and I've experienced a little bit as well in my journey coming back home, but for you, just expanding a little more on just how did you deal with that, living through like how quickly the world is. Like you can be like, one friend is doing great, okay, whatever, and then you see like 15 other ones and you're like, man, what am I doing at home? Just expand a little bit more on just how you kind of got through that. I know you said that you did a lot of writing, a lot of learning about yourself, but just if you can just share a little bit more, I mean, appreciate it.
Yeah, there's a quote I came across like around like soon after graduating. It was that comparison is a thief of joy, and I kind of use that as my North Star. So, like my roommate is in his he's about to start his fourth year. My roommate from college is about to start his fourth year of his PhD now. Cy Stokes, one of the homies from college, just finished his PhD. A couple friends. One friend has an MBA. Like, it's just there was just so much excellence around me, and I just kept repeating that line to me, and like just spending time being as happy for them as much as I could, and recognizing that it was futile to try to compare, and that comparing would actually rob me of joy, would derail me from my path, and actually just result in like depression and angst, right? And jealousy even. It's not to say that there weren't moments in which I didn't question like, oh, why am I not doing those things, or whatever. But I just kept repeating that to me. I was just like, my path looks different. My timing is my timing, and comparison is a thief of joy. So when I saw that, I try to use those moments to celebrate those people and be inspired as much as possible. I try to talk to them and kind of like and ask, how did you arrive, at this point, and what steps did you take, etc. And I think solitude can be a blessing and a burden depending on how you choose to reframe that solitude. And so there were moments in which I was like, man, this is a burden. I was like, I'm lonely, I'm XYZ. But I also chose to use that as a period to get to know myself more than I had ever done. I'm a very social person. I was on these dance teams. I did all this research. I did whatever. So there was a lot of me that was fed by other people, other places and experiences. And so after taking that time to kind of like deconstruct those things, I asked, okay, how could I make whatever cards I have in front of me right now, how could I use those in a way that serves me? And so being at home, rather than view it as something to be embarrassed about or sad about, I realized I was like, man, some people, their home situation isn't smooth like that, and so they don't have the opportunity to be at home. I do, and I still had to pay rent once I got a job.
I remember.
Yeah, immigrant household, oldest boy. But I was like, man, I have an opportunity to sit here and think and figure out my next steps, but also, rather than be in a hurry to keep up with the Joneses and to get a nice spot and to do whatever and have this paycheck that's not paying me very much, you know what I mean? Like go to all of this posturing and performance. I was like, man, being at home is going to give me an opportunity to stack up. I kept thinking about LA. I was like, I'm going to head back to LA within the next 1 to 3 years, in some capacity. And a light bulb went off and I was like, yo, like being at home is my meals were covered. You know what I'm saying? My mom cooks every day. I got to reconnect with my siblings and my mom, and I just use it as an opportunity, kind of like, Goku in the tank charging up. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
In the hyperbolic time chamber, you went in.
Yeah, exactly. And so I decided to view it as that opportunity, and then, and close to 2018, after some more digging, I was like, yo, it's time to take this leap. I was now in a position in which I had saved enough money to buy a car. I had saved enough money to get to LA and survive for like 3 months. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And I had found a place to crash in my girlfriend's apartment. And so being at home initially was a bummer, and then turned into the biggest blessing ever. In part because I chose to view it that way, but also in part because I assigned a very specific function to it, and recognize, okay, this is being at home is in the service of this, right? It's and viewing it as that hyperbolic chamber um, that would allow me to take that next step.
Amazing. And for the viewers, I mean, Mike and I have always been in contact. And at the time when Mike was at home, so we graduated UCLA 2015. So it's coming up in 5 years. I remember Mike was at home, I was still in LA, and then we did a switch. I think you went to LA, there was kind of some overlap, and then I came back home, and just talking about when you first got back. So you got back, you had saved enough money, you bought a car, you had some money for living expenses for a few months, you were crashing, getting that first gig, and really getting the ball rolling. What was that like?
It was hard as hell, man. It was part of me that was like, man, shit, what did I do? Because I had such a clear path, like in the Bay. I had, so for context, I had taken a tech job doing marketing. My team was great. My boss was great. Like everything about it personally, or I guess professionally, was excellent. But I didn't feel as alive as I wanted to, and I had no social life. And on top of it, I was newly in a long distance relationship. So I had made a promise to my partner and to myself. I was like, "Yo, babe, like we're not going to spend more than a year long distance." It was just something that didn't feel was for me. Nor did I feel like it was something that was very sustainable at the beginning of a relationship, anyway. And so, took the sleep, crashed at her spot. Um, had saved enough money, negotiated a work from home situation as well for about 3 months or so. And I was able to do that because I had developed such a good relationship with them. And because they're just beautiful people. And so, but that meant, at the end of like 3 months or something, it's like, oh, like, what's the deal? And so I was hustling. I was going to networking events. I was trying to meet as many people as possible, and I was trying to establish that network here. And it took a while because it almost felt like I was doing the thing that I did to get that first job. So when you only have about 2 years experience, 3 years experience, like there's some people that don't take you seriously. On top of that, navigating prejudice and implicit bias, and kind of like, I got a baby face, dark skin, black, male. And so it was a lot of like trying to get my footing, and, having to take opportunities that may have not necessarily been like, everything my heart was looking for, but would provide me the opportunity to kind of like get established here. And so I ended up finding a job for a startup in the crypto space, cryptocurrency. And I mean, I was there for a month, and it was one of the most toxic places I've ever worked in my entire life. And I quit, and everybody was like, yo, you wild. Like it was dumb money. I had finessed a pretty sizable salary amount. And I was just like, I can't do this. Like the commute was crazy. The environment was unhealthy. And so I took another leap. I was like, I'm gonna quit. I had a month's worth of I had gotten paid, that my expenses were so low at the time that I could make that stretch to like another 2 to 3 months. And then eventually I found another job that felt better and would give me the flexibility to start to experiment with the things I wanted to experiment with.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Just, I think those are the difficult things too. I think that for the viewers or whoever's tuning in is, we don't think about it, but the transitions in anything are actually, some of the most arduous and most difficult times. Is trying to find that perfect. There's never going to be that perfect moment. Like you said, you've used that phrase multiple times. You had to take many leaps of faith within that few couple years. So it's incredible that it's got you here today. Now, knowing you like I do, Mike, being one of your closest friends from UCLA, at least that's what I tell people. I've always looked at you as someone that couldn't be boxed in to just relegated to just this is what you're going to do. And so I kind of want to talk about the current things that you're doing. And one of the things I want to talk about is the clothing brand that you will started, UKOO. This is first collection right here. I want you to just talk and share a little bit about, that your passion for fashion and your passion for looking good, and also paying homage to your roots and your culture and just everything that has entailed.
Yeah, most definitely. So currently I work for a nonprofit remotely that serves physicians. It's a marketing role. I get to do marketing communications for them, which is cool. It's not my life's work or anything, but it'll make sense once I kind of like explain to you how I think about just like living and work and money. But essentially it was exactly that. Like whenever I personally don't like asking people what they do. When you ask someone what they do, they usually just reply with their job. And then when you ask them what they're interested in, you're kind of like, I don't know, what do you mean? So I tend to ask people what excites you. And that kind of takes the conversation down a different path. And so I approach my life very similarly. And so I was like, yo, I'm creative, I'm analytical, I'm strategic, etc. I'm not going to force myself to go down any highly specialized path, right? Nor is that what the future kind of holds, right? And so I had read the 4 Hour Work Week, I think in like 2016 or 17. And I was just inspired by what the author Tim Ferriss was saying. He had this whole concept of the new rich, and of that being people that had a certain degree of like high liquidity and cash, but an income, but also were just thought to optimize their time and the life that they wanted to live like now. And so I knew I wanted to be near art. I knew I wanted to be near creativity. I knew I wanted to try my hand at different things. I had some tech experience, etc. And so with the clothing brand, that was just something that I've been into just fashion and art. And after kind of ending dance, I had to channel that creative energy in some other way. And clothing and styling was something of interest to me. It's also something that is integral part of my Congolese culture. And Will is like one of the flyest dudes that I know. Will is a UCLA homeboy. And so with starting the brand, I used a lot of concepts from the 4 Hour Work Week, but also concept that I had learned myself from working in tech. And so, and along with Comparison is a Thief of Joy. So it was a function of how can I put something into this world, right? And craft this thing that I really want to do and experiment with, without like having to rely on raising a ton of money, having it be in stores, having it, whatever. And so I noticed that a lot of brands were selling directly online. I peeped game that if you were to do a pre-order model, right, you only really had to have 1 or 2 samples of whatever you were selling, put it on the site, make it available for sale, and people would order, and then you just tell them, I got you in 6 weeks, you know what I'm saying, and use that money to fund your inventory, right, and to get product in people's hands without sitting on a whole bunch of, without making like 5,000 armbands or 5,000 pants, and then being needing $10,000, you know what I mean, to do all that. And so it was just an exploration in lineage and ancestry and creative expression and experimenting with the constraints made available. And so I thought to myself, man, what are the fundamental aspects of an outfit, right? You got a top, you got a bottom, and you got like an accessory, right? And so I was like, we're gonna do a 3-piece collection. It's gonna be dope. It's gonna be tailored. It's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be a little rugged. You know, it's gonna pay homage to a story that extends beyond us, and we'll, you know, just create a few samples that we could rock and shoot photos with and do the rest. And so we made 2 suits, one for the models, or actually 2 for the models that we use to shoot with. Hit up one of my homies that was the older brother of one of my previous dance teammates. Super cool dude, one of my best friends now. His name's Sean Martin. You know, paid him $1,000 or whatever to it's important to pay your friends to work for it. And that was like all of the marketing budget that we had. We were just like, but we want to start off the relationship right. And then paid them. We shot the clothes, got a Squarespace website up, put the product on there, and then we use the models were like 6'3", you know what I'm saying, like buff, like I'm not 6'3" and buff. And so we use those same samples, we tailor them, right, to and use it for me and Will's like samples. So it was crazy because we were able, through just 2 samples of the full outfits, we were able to shoot all the marketing. We were able to have suits for ourselves that we can kind of like walk around town in, and people would ask. And then we just had this pre-order set up, and it was just like, yo, this is the brand, take a look. If you rock with it, pre-order it, it'll be available in X amount of time. And so, I mean, if you do the math on that, like, it's not that insane in terms of, you know, it didn't require thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars to make happen. It did require, you know, I won't say the exact number, but it did require, you know, some slightly uncomfortable spending. But between 2 people, we were able to manage it like just fine. And what was more important is we were able to get it out into the world by deciding to play by our rules and by not letting notions of how you were supposed to do it, you know, direct us.
Exactly. And just to be clear, I'm going to put a link in the description for the video for UKOO Studios. I think I have the first collection. So for those of you that haven't peeped it or that will peep it after this video, the first collection was a more bright and like you're going to be seeing, which is dope. It was the orange jacket top, the red armband I previously showed, and we had like the red pant with the same print as the armband. And then Mike and Will made a second part to that collection with the black, and I think it was a green version, right? Like the base color was black with the green. So you had the joint where you want to stand out, and you had the everyday flex. You could just look really clean. So I'm going to put the link in the description below for UKOO Studios. But quality over quantity. I mean, I know a lot of people that are about it, and I think the one thing I loved about your guys' product is that you guys not only put in, you know, incredible amount of effort, but a lot of research into, just like you said, your roots and where you guys come from. And I think that just made it even more personal. And for even someone who doesn't know about that culture per se, or doesn't identify with that, it made me feel like a part of it because you had put in so much work. And so maybe you just speak a little bit about that. I mean, because you guys went the whole 9, and I was a geek about it. I was like, man, I expect nothing less from my guys.
I appreciate it. So UKOO means lineage and ancestry in Swahili. My last name, Wamungu, is in Swahili. It means of God. Swahili is a Bantu language, and it's the most spoken language in the continent of Africa. And Will is Nigerian, which is West African. I'm Congolese, which is like central. It's literally right in the center of Africa. And so, you know, Will is like about a year older. So I think that year he had turned 25, or he was turning 25. Yeah. And we were both kind of like the oldest males in our family. Um, and so we were just kind of at a junction in which we were like, man, like, how can we create art but extend it beyond ourselves? So how the clothing started is originally we just wanted to make like a dope pant that we can kind of like flex in. And after different conversations and like what it would be, what it would look like, we just thought to ourselves that like, man, in order to stand out, especially as quote unquote nobodies, right? Um, we could use some of our strengths of like narrative and storytelling and just the richness of our culture to create kind of like a new category and a new perspective on clothes. And so our clothes are described as made for cultural provocateurs. Provocateur being somebody that instigates the cultural kind of zeitgeist and moment and uses their art or their practice or whatever they do to kind of offer questions about what is going on and like encourage people to think in critical and innovative ways, in celebratory ways. And as far as our story, we wanted to really bridge the gap between like Black and African American culture in the States, along with African culture in the continent. And we focused on a decade, 1960s, onto through like the 70s. And we realized that in the 60s on the continent of Africa, a lot of countries were getting their independence from colonial, European rule. In the 60s here, the civil rights movement was happening. Right? And there was a lot of information being shared back and forth. There was a lot of inspiration being pulled between those places. And the 60s in general was just like a time for like psychedelics, Hendrix. Like there was just such social and political things that happened. And so for us, it was just, how can we tell a story of togetherness, of ancestry, of lineage? How can we celebrate our Blackness, but also how can we invite people to, what's the word, to kind of interrogate and explore their own lineage and how they came to be, and their family and their background. And so, like you said, it resonated with you and it resonated with others as well, whether they were Black or not, because we kind of extended it. We used our experiences as specific focus points, but we extended it beyond that. And we asked, who am I but the child of those that came before me? Who are you and who are we? And so the clothes then turned into as conversation pieces. And so you see the scarification, you see the uko, you see the color, and there's not a day that I wear whether it's the Black or whether it's the orange, in which someone doesn't ask me like, oh, what is that? What is uko? What is this pattern? That starts a conversation. That's that provocation. And so we describe the brand as a study of culture and those who shape it, expressed in textile form. And so that's really all it is conversation pieces and culture in the form of clothes.
Well, it's amazing. Like I said, it will be linked in the description because I think it's something that has been really successful and I think will continue to be. And I think just more people didn't know about it. Is there another collection coming up? What's kind of the next, real quick, if you can let me know, like there's another collection in the works or whatever you can tell us?
Yeah, so they're working on a collection now, heavy on the research front, both in terms of restructuring the business and just the product development and design that needs to go into it. Slight delays, obviously, due to the pandemic that we're in from a supply chain standpoint. But I think the fall, we should be good for another collection. And how we approach it, since it's our products are a reflection of culture and what's going on in the world. And we do a brief before every collection, and we ask ourselves a question that we then try to answer through different design choices and fabric choices, etc. So there should be a collection coming in the fall. And how we operate is like, we don't want to do the 100-piece collections. We're not concerned with Fashion Week, Milan, or whatever. We respect those things. We admire the people and the work that goes into putting those types of projects together. But for us, it's really a function of staple, versatile pieces that transcend time, that you could wear different ways. You could dress up, you could dress down, and that can last a long time. So that's our approach on it, direct to consumer, just controlling the narrative, focusing on quality over quantity, like you said, and owning that relationship.
Amazing. Fall 2020, you guys, UKOO Studios. I like, again, link will be in the description below. And now I'm just transitioning to, you're doing a lot, but we're kind of summing it up for the people here, for the viewer, whoever's tuning in. I know you just recently finished your a semester in grad school, first semester, am I correct?
First, yes.
How was that? What is that like, comparison to undergrad, in comparison to all that you've done prior to that, in terms of from a scholarly standpoint?
It's a push. It's most definitely a push. Excuse me, but it was a smooth experience for me, in a sense. Not difficulty level was high, and I was pushed and challenged, but it was smooth in the sense of, this is 5 years now out of undergrad, um, and so I think knowing oneself and taking the time to be honest about oneself and what you like want to do is less a function of like just knowing, and more of a function of experimenting and seeing what feels good, what doesn't, and kind of having to extract it from your brain, right? By having different conversations, by trying different things, and be like, oh, okay, and refining like um, that direction every time, right? And so with grad school, it was another crazy bet that I made, right? I was thinking, oh, should I get an MBA? Like, I'm interested in entrepreneurship. I want to put myself in a position to where I can use this credential to both accelerate my career if I wanted to be on an employee track, or to kind of like make it easier for me to get funding if I wanted to go the more entrepreneur path, right? And I was like, what am I interested in? In tech, design, impact, kind of like culture was something that was big for me. And I discovered a program at USC that was funded by Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine. It's a Master's of Science in Integrated Design, Business, and Technology. And how it's structured is completely different than what your typical MBA or grad school program is structured. It's very project-based. They encourage you to start a business or a startup or just whatever while you're in the program. They accept everyone from musicians to designers to engineers to business people. And about 60% of the semester is the more traditional like videos and coursework and textbooks and etc. And about 40% of it is just straight projects in these interdisciplinary teams. So very different from undergrad, and I think why I'm enjoying it more than others is because I went into it with a lot of clarity. I chose a program that was integrated in this fashion because I felt like that was where the future is going. It was also very flexible. I still wanted to earn an income and to be able to like fund, my UKOO experimentation and other entrepreneurial ideas here and there. And so I like the flexibility. Most of it is online. Um, and so what was crazy is when the pandemic hit, like my other friends in grad school, they've had a really hard time transitioning because they're in these programs and these courses that were very traditional, and that were structured with you having your butt in the seat physically. And like my program just kept going, like nothing happened. Like nothing happened. Everything was already structured to be online. You know what I mean? And so I was like, yo, I really made a bet on the future. And this is an example of it. Like the world's got shaken up. and we have not been impacted. You know what I'm saying? At least in terms of like the education, um, transition wasn't difficult. You know, there was no transition outside of just the mental, right, reorienting. Um, so yeah, the program is dope, and I'm hoping to use it as a vehicle, or I am using it, I should say, as a vehicle, another vehicle for experimentation, vehicle for networking. You know what I'm saying? USC, you know, USC got a mafia of alumni. Um, you know, I still bleed blue, but
Always.
uh, but I wanted to stay in LA. You know, that's another thing as well. I wasn't trying to compete with like friends that got into Harvard or MIT or whatever. I was just like, I want to be in LA. You know what I'm saying? I want flexibility. Um, this program is incredible. It's multidisciplinary, and so I've been able to enjoy it, and I'm reaping the benefits of it already.
Amazing. Well, Mike, I just want to kind of, kind of take it back to 13, 14-year-old self. For whoever may be listening and viewing this, I think you are the pinnacle of someone who's come from, literally worked your way up from the ground. And I think if you could just say something or speak to your 13 or 14-year-old self, you're just starting high school, and given the circumstances now are a little bit different than what it normally would be, just with all the experiences, all the adversities, everyone you've come in contact with, everything you've learned inside and outside the classroom, what would you say to your 13 or 14-year-old self in terms of navigating their own path through this crazy thing we call life?
Oh man, it's tough. 13, 14-year-old Mike
All right.
is some. Um, I wouldn't say much because I wouldn't want to deter him too much. But what I would say is uh, to keep your curiosity alive, um, and to keep your creativity alive. And I think that would be enough. And I say that because I think what happens, especially as we get older, the realities of having to pay bills, of whatever else, um, they just hit you, and it's like, yo, I gotta make certain decisions. I may have a partner, I may have a child, you may just whatever, right? Um, but I also think that we get pushed into these scripts, and we get pushed into these trajectories and these paths that are what our parents may think we should do, what society may think we should do, what teachers may think you should do, et cetera, right? And so I think there's a lot of, um, I always say this to people when they look at me crazy, like I'm mad dramatic, but I feel like up until from like birth to 25 and starting in your teenage years, um, we die a creative death, and we die a physical death, or like not as in you literally die, but as in just like becoming disconnected from your body. And so I think a lot of people, and myself included to some capacity, like that creativity just kind of gets drained from you because you get punished for coloring outside the lines, right? You you might fall flat on your face because you try to make it as a dancer or as an artist and it didn't work out, or you were presented with certain challenges, right? Um, and so I think sometimes we tend to hide that creative side of us, and we move away from play and from curiosity. And I think a lot of times too, when you get a 9 to 5 job and you're sitting all day on a computer, whatever, you get disconnected from your body. Your back starts to ache. You know what I'm saying? You can't hit the dance moves the way you used to. You do a layup, it's like you know what I'm saying? And so I think you almost there's a rebellion, if you will, but a reclamation as well, that happens when you choose to continue to be creative and to explore what excites you and what you're curious about, and to also explore like your body, you know what I mean, and what it can do in how athletic or just whatever you can do with it. So I would just say that. I would say keep your curiosity alive, keep your what was the second part? Keep your creativity alive.
Absolutely. And I was going to follow up, but I think it kind of covers that as well, of just speaking to someone who maybe just be graduating and going to the job force. But I think those 2 points are extremely applicable to that situation as well. Staying curious, staying creative. If you had anything else to add to, a little bit advanced of just, you're just graduating college. If there's any, last things you want to add, words of wisdom, thoughts of encouragement.
Yeah, I would say take the time to deconstruct your, not like a singular path, but your interests and what vehicles you might use to experiment with them, to explore them, to kind of like stress test them, um, and just literally like map it out on paper. I'm into fashion, music, art, etc. I'm into X, Y, Z, and then just ask yourself like, what could that look like, right? What is something that I could do tomorrow? Or what is, like, say you want to run a multi-million-dollar company, or you want to launch a podcast, or you want to whatever. It's like, what is a baby version of that that you can start, right? Just to get your feet wet, just to get started, etc. Because there are no, we see it now. Like, people before, if you wanted to do music, you had to look a certain way. You had to meet all these people. You had to move to LA. You had to do whatever. You had to do all these things, right? If you wanted to dance, same deal. Like, now, you can get a microphone. You can get, whatever software on your computer. You can record with some egg crates in your closet. You know what I'm saying? Like, drop it on Twitter or TikTok or whatever, and you got a hit. You know what I'm saying? I think, what's the name? Lil Nas X dropped Old Town Road. That was like a YouTube track. Yeah, you know what I mean? So it's like, there are no rules, right? And there are specific ways in which you can kind of try to optimize that will allow you to do some of these creative things. But I kind of just view, you need income to live and to sleep and to eat. You know what I mean? And try to find something that will make sure those bases are covered, so you're financially free to create. You don't have to be rich. You just have to not be worried about your next meal.
Live comfortably. We talked about that all the time. Live comfortably.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about your next meal, or where you're gonna sleep that night. As long as those things are covered, you're young enough to make do with a couch or with just a bed, you know what I'm saying, with some simple food, and to just start experimenting. So I'll say that.
Man, Mike, a man of an incredible journey, and I still think is just scratching the surface. And it's I am super lucky to have you as one of my closest friends still to this day, and always remaining in contact and just always trying to pick each other's brains, and always great conversation. So I just want to say thank you again, Mike, for coming on to the podcast, and for the viewers that are tuning in. I just hope that you guys can take something from this. This man has a lot to offer and a lot of inspiration, and hopefully you can even just take one thing from that. Thank you again, Mike, for being on episode 3 of the Of Like Minds podcast, and hopefully we can do a follow-up at some point down the future. But I'm wishing you all the best. Stay safe and healthy, man, and stay in touch. All right.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you for having me. It's gonna be crazy when you blow up and we do part 2. You know what I'm saying? You got 100,000 subscribers. So,
hey, you were there from the beginning, man. Always, brother.
Yeah.
I love you, man. We'll stay in touch.
Peace.